Hey y'all, Data Guy here. And today I have a really cool video for you today around Estuary. I'm actually building a real-time CDC pipeline without running a whole ton of infrastructure going from Postgres to CDC. And that's because Estuary does one thing really well. It streams data out of your database and into wherever you need it in real time with exactly once delivery, and you don't need to run any streaming infrastructure yourself, so no Kafka or Connect cluster or jars to babysit. And today I'm going to show you how easy it is by building a live Postgres to ClickHouse pipeline with Estuary from start to finish. And if you've ever tried to stand something like this up with Debezium, you know that there's a Kafka Connect cluster to run, there's configs to nurse, there's a schema change and prod that you need to manage, right? And Estuary's pitch is that all that becomes a managed service where you point a managed capture at your database. Rows that you type into pSQL can show up in ClickHouse about a second later. And then we're going to fan out that same data to a second destination, in this case Google Sheets, without even touching the source again. So without further ado, let's get into the code and start building. So before we start writing any code, I actually do want to just walk you through the architecture that we'll be using here. So essentially we'll have a local Postgres database that we're just going to run with a small e-commerce schema. And then we're going to connect it to Estuary to capture any changes out of it using log-based CDC. So the data is going to land in something Estuary calls a collection, and then from that collection, Estuary materializes into ClickHouse Cloud, and then we're also going to materialize it into a Google Sheet too. And the reason why you reach for Estuary here instead of building this yourself is, first, it's fully managed. There's no cluster to run or patch. It's built for sub-second latency with exactly once delivery, so I'm not choosing between fast and correct. And any one capture can feed any number of destinations at once, which is a trick that point-to-point tools can't do. So you're going to get all three of those today without needing to write any additional streaming code. And so quick tour of the stack, right? Postgres is the source. Estuary is going to be our pipeline here, and then ClickHouse Cloud is our main destination. And I'm going to have Docker run this sequence in the database locally, and Grok to expose the local Postgres to the cloud. And then I'll just have a small Python script that's going to generate live traffic so we can kind of see something moving and watch data actually arrive when we open the config file. So next, what we'll do is just quickly also go through the model here. So, number one, the capture, right? This is reading from the source. So this is ours reading a Postgres write-ahead log, WAL, you might have seen it referred to as. So it's log-based CDC. It means we're not pulling tables and hammering the database. We're using the same replication screen that Postgres already produces for its own replicas. So inserts and updates and deletes all in order. Then the collection is where our data is going to land, right? And the collection is not a queue, it's the data that's sitting on cheap object storage in the middle of the pipeline. And Estuary builds these on top of their own streaming engine, Gazette, which is where that exactly once guarantee comes from as well. And then the materialization is pushing a collection out to a destination, which is going to be ClickHouse in our case. The reason why collection in the middle matters is because the source captured once, but then every destination can read from that stored collection, which means if I want to add a second destination later, I don't need to reread Postgres. I don't need to add a load to my production database. I just point a new materialization at a collection that already exists, which again, point-to-point replication can't do that. So first, now actually getting into building this, let's go and set up our local Postgres environment. So standing up local Postgres, we're just going to do it with this Docker Compose here. So nothing really that interesting going on here. Just local database Postgres 16, making sure you have the WAL level logical, because this is one thing that CDC will absolutely require. The one out of the box Postgres will run at level of replica, which is enough to feed or read replica, but not enough to decode the individual row changes. So we need the full logical, and any CDC tool is going to need that. And then I'm also just putting this on port 5433 because I already have a Postgres running on port 5432. So now that's really all you need to have a database that's up and ready to stream its changes. So now let's set up some things that'll actually make it worth streaming. And so within there, what we'll just do is go to Postgres. We have this quick init schema. So, just creating a basic e-commerce table. So some customers, adding some products, creating some orders for those customers, and, of those products, right? And then we also have our seed, and this is just going to feed in some starter rows within that schema. So, 10 customers, 12 products, 8 orders, nothing really super clever or interesting. And so now we have a database in logical mode. We have a schema with data. Now, the part that's going to be on a Debezium project would be a week of work. Now it'll be around 10 lines is our Estuary CDC here. So here within this Postgres file, what we're doing is manage CDC. So first we're creating a dedicated user for the capture with the replication attribute, so make sure it has the right permissions to actually capture those write-ahead logs and open that replication connection and read those logs. And then we're going to grant it access to that actual, those tables we just created, and that's the built-in role on Postgres 14 and up, this PG read all data. And then now here we're going to go create a little table called public flow watermarks, and so Estuary uses this to track how far its backfill has gotten. So it'll write a marker in here, read it back through the replication stream, and that's how it knows exactly where the historical backfill ends and the live tail begins, and the handshake is part of how you get the exactly once guarantee. Then for the publication is just Postgres way of saying these specific tables are allowed to stream. And then line 33, you'll see you have flow watermarks is again in the publication right alongside the business tables. And spotlighting this because I got it wrong the first time. If you leave the watermarks table out of the publication, connection works fine, or the capture connects fine. The backfill starts, and then it'll just hang forever because Estuary is sitting there waiting to see its own watermark come back through a stream it was never allowed to read. So our missing table name is in this list, and the whole thing will quietly stall. So if your backfill never finishes, check this first. Make sure you have the flow watermarks there. And then down here, we're going to be setting replica identity full and on all three tables. And so by default, Postgres will only log the primary key plus what changed. If you set it to full, it'll tell Postgres to log the entire row before and after. So you don't strictly need it, but it'll make the change stream a lot richer. And then when we peek at the raw events later, you'll see the full before and after picture instead of just a key. And that's the whole Postgres side, right? We have a user, watermarks table, publication, a replica identity setting, and from here Estuary is going to handle the parts that are a lot harder to do, right? The replication slot, historical backfill, all of those different operations. So the next thing we're going to do is just also create a little helper script here. So this is just generating essentially some activity here. So I won't spend a ton of time on this, but essentially all this is doing is just drip feeding new activity in the database. You can see we're just creating a connection to some local data, and then having some fake orders here with first names, last names, connecting into our Postgres database, then just executing some inserts of different users and orders into the database. So what we'll be doing is when I actually run kind of the demo part of this, you'll see this is just going to be in publishing data to our Postgres database, and then we'll be able to see those captures come through live. But I'd say there's one important line in this file, that isn't just basically fake data, which is auto commit is equal to true here, right? So what this is doing, it means that every single insert or update is in its own committed transaction. So one change, one commit, one clean event in the log. If I had batched all these different changes up, they would have landed downstream in one lump, and the demo would look kind of laggy and spiky and weird. By committing each change on its own, this is what's going to make a downstream update tick over one at a time, which is how you'd want to see them, right? Small lane. It's a small line, but it's a big effect on how the demo is going to feel. So now we can generate change. We have a source that's going to stream it. Now the only thing left to do is describe the actual pipeline that's going to carry it. And that is going to be this commerce.flow.yaml file, right? And this is going to be actually our Estuary pipeline here. So here within this commerce flow file, it's really the heart of the repo, right? And in the video, I'm going to go show you how you can build most of this by clicking through the Estuary dashboard, because that's faster and probably what you want to do in reality. But this is also the same pipeline as code, and it's also what you can pull down with flowctl to commit to Git and review in a pull request, right? So you can still use the GUI to design and move fast, but YAML is always good for keeping in version, for CI/CD, and also it's easy for your agents to read as well and understand, which I'll get into a little bit later when I start talking about kind of the Estuary agent skills. So first, top of the file here, right, this is using Estuary's Postgres source connector, points at our database through that ngrok address we'll set up, and then it'll authenticate as the flow capture user from chapter 3. So it's 3 bindings, 1 per table, and each one is going to say, take this table from Postgres, write it into this collection. Then down here under collections, we have, this is where our data is actually landing. So each collection will have a key, which is in line 46 here, the customer ID. And this is how Estuary knows to, what's an update versus a new row. And it has a JSON schema describing the fields. And then when you build this through the dashboard, Estuary infers all of this for you by looking at the table. So I'm just showing you the shape that it's actually going to produce. So then what we'll do is come down here and we're going to set up our ClickHouse connection. So it's going to use the official ClickHouse to Estuary connector, right? So we're just going to set up with our ClickHouse host password. A lot of this is going to be set up actually within the Estuary UI as well. So we'll get on the details of where you're going to pull those values soon. And then we're also going to add a secondary destination off the same collection as Google Sheets, right? So really showing how, hey, you can actually have updates that go through not one, but two locations, right? And also something really cool here and a quick concept that can trip people up is it's a real knob you can set here in every destination, right? And you can actually see it here where it is the merge updates versus delta updates, right? So you can see with merge is the default, right? And that's the one most people want. Destination holds the current state of your data. It's one row per key, and I walk order 4 from pending to paid to ship. And in ClickHouse, that stays a single row that updates in place to show the latest status, and the connector will reconcile it for you. So what you see is always going to be now. However, if you want to switch to delta updates, that gets flipped. Estuary doesn't overwrite anything. It appends every change as a new row. So an insert, an update, a delete, each one lands as its own record. So a delta is in a smaller version of a merge. It's a different shape entirely. It's the full change log, every intermediate step, append only, and you collapse those rows down yourself at query time, usually something, like replacing merge tree in ClickHouse. So the way to hold it is, merge gives you your current state, delta gives you a stream of changes, and merge is what you want for a live mirror of your tables. Delta, though, is cheaper at high volume, and it's what you want when you care about history and you want to have an audit trail and every status and order that ever passed through. So same setting, delta updates flag on every materialization, so you choose it per table. And that is really all the setup we need to do for our connectors. So next thing you want to do, just brew install ngrok here. Just I'm running this command right now as well. And then what we're going to do is run ngrok tcp 443, and this is what's going to allow us to tunnel out to an external connector to Estuary from our local environment. So just make sure you have this installed, then go through this quick setup flow with your auth token. It's pretty simple. So now we have our forwarding address, so what we're going to do is copy this, right? And then this is just what's going to allow our environment to just basically act as a web host. So just basically simulating more realistically a production scenario where you'd be, having this happen from a hosted Postgres environment. Next, we're going to go to estuary.dev and also sign up here. So I'll go through the sign up flow and then I'll meet you in this Estuary dashboard. So now over in Estuary, the first thing we're going to do is create a new Postgres capture. So here, we'll go to new, is go into sources, and we're going to create a new capture here. And then we're going to search for the Postgres connector. So we're going to select our Postgres connector here. And then I'm going to start filling out our different form here. So after you've added all of your endpoint configuration, so here flow capture, commerce database, and then our password is just flow capture password. And then down here under schema evolution, you'll see it already knows my bindings here. So customers, orders, products, it's able to see all of those immediately without really any other configuration necessary. And then you'll also see if we go to this collection tab here, you can see the different fields that it'll collect from, the different sources, so customer ID, created at, the metadata, so all really useful information to know. And then we're automatically going to keep schemas up to date, so under schema evolution, so this is going to automatically evolve as we make changes to our schema as I talked about earlier. So then we'll just hit next, and test runs fine, so now I'm good to save and publish. So we'll finish off publishing our Postgres database. So here it's just going to test, save, and publish it. So now that we have this source, we're now going to go and materialize it out to ClickHouse, right? So first do is go open right here to the top right, hit materialize. So here what we're going to do is pick the ClickHouse official connector here. And start filling out our materialization information. So ClickHouse materialization, our very unique name here. And then we're going to need to get our address and port for our database that we're going to be materializing for. So here you're just going to be putting your ClickHouse address for your actual database, host and port if you just hit connect on ClickHouse. Database default, your default username, or change whatever username you're actually using, and your password here. And then if you want to configure sync schedule, you can. I'm just going to leave those default values for now. And then if we go all the way down here, you can see our source collection. So our customers, orders, products, all here. And we'll just, again, leave it with the default values because it did a great job actually setting up all those tables for me. So then what we can do is just hit save and publish over here. So save and publish, and this will go and publish our materialization. And now we have our data being able to be materialized into ClickHouse. And that's all you need to do, right? Because this is the official connector. It will automatically sync with your ClickHouse environment. And you can see now it is able to read docs and push them over into ClickHouse. So then if we go into ClickHouse, we're now able to see all of our customer tables, all of our information and our orders, and all the information streaming now from our local Postgres database. Right, so really, really awesome. Very easy to set up there. So now that we have this set up, let's actually start using it and showing off some of the awesome kind of schema evolution capabilities that Estuary provides us here. And then now what I'm going to do is I'm going to update an order here where I'm going to set the status shipped where order ID equals 4, right? And so if I execute this, right, so add this, make sure it gets executed, updates 1. Now you'll see if I have my order ID 1 that was here pending in my ClickHouse warehouse, this is then going to, if I then go and run the select query and see the updated one, right, because cookies are going to take a second to refresh, but this will immediately give me my updated status for that order ID 4. So really, really awesome. We're literally a second from my local machine. Estuary is able to then populate this data back out into ClickHouse and do that kind of change data capture, which is really impressive. So now let's say I want to add another materialization, right? So let's say I want to have this also happen within Google Sheets. So I just go back to Postgres, hit Materialize, right? And then I go to select Google Sheets here, right? And then what I'll do is Google Sheets Estuary. And then what I'll do is go create a Google Sheet for this to populate into. So just create some Estuary sheet, and then what you're going to do is just copy your URL from this sheet. And then we are going to go back into here, spreadsheet URL, and then I'll just quickly sign into Google. So now you see I have my default field collections. I have my collections that are set up down here, right? And then this is going to automatically create a sheet called customers to populate my data to. So then I'll go next. We will test this out. So save it and publish. And then this will start publishing to that Google Sheets as well. So make sure you're signed into your right Google account for the Sheets. But here you see now I've got my materialization saved and published. Within a couple seconds, we can now see our data now being streamed to our Google Sheets as well. So really, really awesome, super easy to set up, and you can see how you can extend this out to any other number of locations that you might want to. Now, another cool operation you want to do, is like, hey, let's say I want to delete something, right? So I want to delete from orders where order ID equals 7, right? And then if I go back into ClickHouse, you'll see that if I go and select order ID 7, after I refresh it here, that order will now be gone. So 1 second, refresh. So now after refreshing the page, we can see here that we have So now after refreshing the page, we can see that we have this kind of null value where the old order 7 used to be. And that's also because of some settings that we had here. So if you remember, right, we had actually earlier set the soft delete or set the soft delete option off and turned on hard delete, right? So that means that when we delete something, it's not flagged or zeroed out, it's just gone. And that's because, again, we have hard delete on. There is also a softer option that's worth knowing about, right? So if you turn hard delete off, Estuary will leave the row in place with the deleted marker instead, which is exactly what you want if you're keeping an audit history and never want to truly lose a record. But for a warehouse, it's meant to mirror production, which I'm doing here. Hard delete is probably the right call, and that's what you're watching here. So those are inserts, updates, deletes, the full set of the CDC pipeline. Now, if you only remember one thing from this entire build session, make it this part, because this is kind of the part that breaks hand-rolled pipelines, and it's what Estuary can absorb without blinking. So a schema change, right? A product team adds a field on a brittle pipeline. That could be a 2 a.m. page because the new column shows up at the source. Downstream job has no idea it exists, and the ingestion either silently drops the field or falls over completely. So watch how this goes instead. If I instead, go in here and write an alter table statement and say, hey, integer, want to add a column for discount cents to the orders table in Postgres. So a real live change, right? And here actually it already did that, so let's add another one. So just added a T on the end of it, and you can see now we have an alter table statement that's run, and we'll be able to see this change take effect, right? So we've added the discount pipeline or column, right? And then if I want to, let's say, update orders, set discount cents, equals 1500, where order ID equals 4, and I'll add that T again there, right? So we're going to add that, update 1. And so now there's an actual discount on an order, so there's real data sitting in that new column. So if we go now and open up the Estuary dashboard, So here back in our capture, right, we'll go and open up data guy source Postgres, and I'll just open this up to kind of show you. We actually have automatically keeping schemas up to date flagged here under schema evolution, right? So this will automatically make sure that our schema actually does stay up to date. And if we go down now actually to orders here and go and look at this collection, you'll see that we have our discount cents still now present there where it wasn't before, right? All because we added it via our local Postgres environment. So we just hit next and save and publish, right? And this is just because I want to double check. And now if we go back into ClickHouse, we can see we have our new field here, discount cents T, and with that value of 1500 here for order 8. So that is everything, or customer ID 4 here though, so key thing there to notice. So that is everything I want to show you around C evolution, a really key part of really any kind of CDC pipeline, right? But there's no pipeline rebuild, there's no migration script or coordinate or deploy across 3 systems at once, right? I changed the source, I refreshed it once, and the change flowed all the way to the warehouse, the sheets, and that's the proof point, right? It's a tool that handles schema drift this cleanly is a tool that'll survive contact with the real team shipping real changes, which is what you really want. So I'd also be remiss if I didn't talk about the command line tools and the kind of agent skills that you have for working with Estuary as well, because that's how you're probably going to end up working with it in this very agentic day and age. So first, if I brew install flowctl here, you'll see this will, number one, go and install the entire flowctl tool for Estuary. And always make sure you're actually tapping it first. So first tapping it, and now I'm brew installing the actual flowctl. And then once you've trusted it, you'll see now it's going to install and we should be good to go. And this is what it lets you design things, like this YAML file, right? So you're not doing it all by hand. You can use flowctl to actually build kind of your pipelines without, with a command line interface instead of, via UI or, by yourself. So that is really everything I wanted to go over today around Estuary. If you want to go check it out for yourself, go to estuary.dev.com, or not actually .com, just estuary.dev. I don't want to make that mistake. And so if you like this, let me know in the comments below. Would love to make more videos on Estuary. I think it's a really, really awesome change data capture tool. And you can see if you got to keep multiple databases in sync, right, this is probably one of the best tools you can ask for, right? So go try your own database. The capture setup is like 10 lines, right? And I can send you all the code over my Patreon. And Estuary also is a free tier, so you can wire up your own Postgres to wherever pipeline a day and see it all work for yourself without having to spend a dime. But above all else, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Data Guy out.